I woke up with a strong hunger and chills and with difficulty went to the kitchen. The refrigerator was empty, so my parents didn't have any money again. I was wondering where I could get food, and then I remembered the cellar. My mom used to keep canned food there. Going down to the basement, I caught my foot on the cans. It was strange. We never had such supplies. I turned on the light and couldn't believe my eyes. From floor to ceiling, the basement was filled with glass jars of money. Where were they from? I saw on the news yesterday that the police found a similar stash in the possession of a mobster. I would never have thought that of my mom, but my dad. Was he involved in something? My dad used to be very secretive, but lately he had completely stopped communicating with me and my mom. Not long ago, I saw him arguing with someone on the phone, and when my dad noticed me, he got very angry and slammed the door in my face. Did my dad get involved with the mafia? I pushed the bad thoughts away. He was not like that. Dad took care of me. He even got a second job so that I could buy some medicine. I had a congenital heart defect and it only got worse every day. Suddenly, the front door slammed upstairs, and I heard my mom's voice. I quickly went upstairs and immediately asked, "Where's so much money in our basement from?" But my mom was noticeably nervous and quickly told me not to touch anything there and go to bed. I was still too weak. It all sounded fake. Mom, are you and Dad hiding something from me? But she only said that she had a lot of problems, and she promised to find out about those jars with money from my dad today. And that I must have imagined it. When my mom and I had dinner in the evening, I was on pins and needles, and after eating and taking the obligatory pills, my head began to split. My mom took me upstairs, and as soon as I lay down, I fell into a deep sleep. In the morning, I was awakened by voices. My parents were arguing loudly in the kitchen. My ears were ringing, but I managed to get there. When my parents saw me in the doorway, they fell silent. My dad said they had something to tell. There was indeed a huge money of money stored in our basement, but whose money was it? It turned out that our neighbor Jack had brought the jars to the basement. Apparently, he was a fraud and dragged my parents into his scam to hide his stolen money from the authorities. But that's a crime! Did my parents not think about the fact that they could be put away? Suddenly, my mom started crying and said it was for me. Jack paid them for the basement, and thanks to him, we could buy medicine. I was ashamed that I had suspected my dad. My parents were trying their best to help me, but I didn't want them to end up behind jars because of me. I didn't want us all to end up in jail, so I decided to talk to Jack myself. I would go and tell Jack to get his damn money quickly. But if he didn't do that, I would go to the police. Mom said I was too excited and made me take my medicine again. Otherwise, I might have an episode. I dutifully drank the pills, and when my parents left on business, I immediately went to the neighbor. I went to his house and looked in the window. Jack had brought the gym bag into the kitchen, in which something rattled. The jars! That scoundrel hadn't moved everything to our basement yet? My head was spinning with anger, and I stepped back and brushed against the rake by the window. They fell with a crash. I hoped Jack didn't hear me. I looked out the window again, but there was no one in the kitchen. And then, behind me, I heard, "What are you doing here?" It was Jack. He held a huge shovel in his hands. It was too late to retreat, so I blurted out that I would turn Jack into the police. Let him leave my parents alone immediately. He said in amazement that he didn't know what I was talking about. Then he took the candy out of his pocket and handed it to me. "Here, it seems they are your favorite." Favorite? I had never eaten candy in my life. Maybe he wanted to poison me. Terrified, I backed away and ran with great effort toward the house. But Jack didn't follow me. What would that mean? At the fence, I ran into my mom. She was busy in the garden and immediately asked what happened. I shouted that Jack was dangerous and I needed to call the police right away. But Mom said she had no idea what I was talking about. What? We were just talking about money this morning. My mother looked at me with incomprehension. We were poor. We never had any money. What did she mean? I grabbed my mom's hand and dragged her down to the basement to show her the money. Inside, I could barely find a light switch. The light bulb sparked for a long time, and when it finally lit up, the basement was empty. But how? My mom looked at me sadly. Suddenly, I heard footsteps. Someone was coming towards us. It was Jack. He was getting close. The door swung open, and I saw my dad standing in the doorway. He asked me why I was in the basement again. I explained vaguely about the jars, but my dad said I was hallucinating from the new pills. And that I urgently needed to see a doctor. What? Dad, you said it was our neighbor's money. Mom, why aren't you talking? She gently took my arm and pushed me toward the exit. No, what do you want to do with me? I'm not going. Did Jack frighten my parents enough to send me to an asylum just to keep my secret? We needed to get out and run to the police. I would turn Jack into the authorities, and I would make sure my parents didn't go to jail. I ran for the door, but my dad grabbed me tightly. Let me go! I pushed him away and tried to run outside, but my mom had already blocked the front door. I needed another way, and I ran as fast as I could to my room. Dad's footsteps could be heard somewhere below. As soon as I was in my room, I snapped the lock in one motion and rushed to the window. But if I jumped, I might lose consciousness immediately because of my weakness. I was thinking of another way to escape. But suddenly my dad jerked the doorknob and asked me softly why I had closed it. I didn't say anything. And then I heard loud bangs. They decided to break down the door. There was no way out. I climbed onto the windowsill, squeezed my eyes shut, and took a step. I landed badly. I think I hurt my ankle, but I had to hurry. Even if my parents were covering Jack, only I could tell the truth and save them. Running was heartbreaking. My vision blurred, but then I saw the police station ahead. Just a little bit left. Suddenly I heard the roar of an engine. My parents, they're after me. I kept running, trying not to look back. Then the noise of the engine stopped. What happened? At that moment, I was grabbed and dragged back. "Where are you going, daughter?" said the voice in my ear. I tried to pull away, but my strength was gone, and my parents forced me into the car. The locks on the door snapped shut. My mom held me tight all the way, and as we drove up to the house, I saw Jack in the window. He was watering the lawn near the property and stole a glance at me. I think he knew I wanted to turn him to the police. As soon as we arrived, Dad threw me into the basement and locked me in. He said it was all for my own good. I was trembling, and I tried to climb the ladder, but I didn't have the strength. And then I heard a strange voice behind the wall. I was literally paralyzed with horror. What did they want to do to me? Suddenly, several bricks popped out of the wall with a bang, and a face appeared in the opening. It was Jack. He got to me first. Now I was dead for sure. I felt like I was going to faint. I could barely stand. "Come here, don't be afraid," Jack said softly. Well, no! Then Jack reached into his pocket for something. My heart sank, but suddenly he handed me a piece of candy and said that the sweetness would certainly make me feel better. Those candies again? Jack suddenly asked if my parents had passed me candy from him. No, of course. We ate vegetables all our lives. He was very surprised, said that he had long thought the behavior of my parents was suspicious. As we drove past, he noticed my tear-stained face. And then he heard a noise in the basement. Jack knew that our houses were connected by an underground passageway, so he decided to find out what was going on. Suddenly, I heard the basement door open. It was Dad. After a moment's hesitation, Jack said that we had to run as fast as possible. We barely managed to squeeze into the narrow opening. I was too weak and Jack scooped me up in his arms. From the stale air, my head was getting blurry and I blacked out. The last thing I remembered was a thin line of light ahead. I woke up at Jack's house. Turned out he had already called the police. Mom and Dad were detained and taken to the police station. Who would have thought it would end like this? After that, a long trial began, and I did not understand what was happening. And finally, at the final meeting, I learned the truth. It turned out that all this time, my parents gave me sugar pills, not drugs, so it got worse and worse. And the money that Mom and Dad received from charity funds, they saved it for themselves and hid in the basement. Jack really had nothing to do with it. The police never found those jars of bills. But it wasn't them that bothered me. It was the fact that my closest people were using me to get rich. I couldn't believe it. As a result, my parents were put away for 10 years and I was going to be sent to an orphanage. The doctor also said that I did not have long to live because the funds could not allocate more money for treatment. Life was falling apart right before my eyes. But to my surprise, Jack decided to take custody of me, and as soon as the documents were ready, in gratitude, I decided to prepare a festive dinner for my parents' Zucchini. I may not live a long life, but in the time that remains, I would very much like to repay the kindness of the man who saved me. I barely made it to my parents' garden, and Jack saw me there. He immediately rushed to help me, saying that I needed to conserve my strength. We were cutting zucchini when we saw a piece of glass under one of the bushes. What was it? Jack quickly began to dig up the flower bed, and a minute later, he was holding a jar filled to the brim with bills. Soon we dug up a dozen more of the same. I couldn't believe my eyes. This amount was enough not only for pills, but also for surgery for me. I could recover completely. My head was spinning again, but this time from happiness. My friend Leo appeared in the doorway of the house, followed by the woman from the custody service. She said I would have 3 fathers now. What? Then 2 twins, who looked to be in their 20s, came out to us. Leo introduced them. These were Toby and Mike, his best friends, and they would also be my guardians. Did I get adopted by 3 people? Was that even possible? However, the guys immediately invited me to lunch. I was very hungry, but there was only instant noodles on the table. And I remembered how my mother used to cook. A lump rose in my throat. A couple of months ago, my parents died in a car accident. Everyone was saying that I needed to move on with my life, but how? The children from the orphanage did not accept me. I was withdrawn and shy, and when I thought that nothing good would happen in my life, my old friend Leo wrote to me. I had been running an Instagram page for a long time, and there I pour my heart out in posts. Once he subscribed to me and we began to communicate. Despite the difference of 4 years, it was always very easy with him. He was the only person who understood me, and he was so naive and kind, just like a child. When Leo found out about my tragedy, he urged me to move on with my life and try to go to the medical school I had so longed for. And indeed, it turned out that my parents left me savings to pay for college. But alas, according to the law, only the guardians who would adopt me could get them. Leo cryptically replied that he knew how to help. He had his own house, so he could take over custody. God, Leo, are you serious? And now I was sitting in the kitchen and I couldn't believe that Leo and I had made it. But 3 guardians were too much, of course. But come on, I decided to thank Leo and start by washing the dishes. But Leo decided to help me. Guys don't like washing dishes, do they? He was humming a tune, and I was embarrassed to say that he had a very pleasant voice. Leo smiled. He wanted to record his song for a long time, but his guitar was broken, and he didn't have enough money for the one he dreamed of. It was expensive. Lowering his eyes, he said that they were now on a tight budget, but he added that I would not need anything. Oh, Leo, for me the main thing is that you are near. I fell asleep with a feeling that I was in my place, but in the morning, as soon as I opened my eyes, the twins burst into the room with a phrase that today I would clean the house according to the schedule. This wasn't how I imagined my first day in a new family, but I quickly gathered myself. After all, the guys took me in. I was dusting when I found a bag of balloons under the table. They seemed to know it was my birthday tomorrow. I smiled, but there was a knock on the door. A loader was standing in the doorway with a huge box. New TV? Wow, it could cover half of the wall and had a camera. And Leo said they didn't have much money. The twins fussed and said that they didn't have money. And Mike had won this TV in the lottery. Wow, cool. What a lucky guy. During the cleaning, the day passed unnoticed, and before I went to bed, I was already looking forward to Leo and the guys congratulating me in the morning. However, this did not happen. Confused, I went down to breakfast and heard the twins loudly discussing some party. Wow. So there would also be a surprise party? I pretended not to hear anything. I wanted to go for a walk, but the twins suddenly blocked my path. What happened? Toby handed me the money and a list of groceries. And Mike said I needed to buy them all, and quickly. I was in shock. Did they send me out for groceries on my own birthday? I was so taken aback that I couldn't argue. In the store, it turned out that the most expensive products were on the list. Not everyone could afford them. But I immediately checked myself. The guys were trying for me. Anticipating the fun, I dragged my bag home and opened the door. But there were already a bunch of strangers hanging out in the room. Looked like the twins were going to announce that I was the birthday girl. But Toby just barked that everyone was already hungry, and I could go to my room and let them hang out. Wait, wasn't this a holiday for me? Tears of resentment welled up in my eyes. Had Leo forgotten about me too? I didn't expect that from him. Depressed, I went to my room and suddenly heard my name. I listened. Mike was bragging to his brother Toby. I would have taken someone under guardianship before if I knew how much money it would bring. We'll take all her money and then we'll find a new victim, he said. What? The front door slammed. It was Leo. He immediately came up to me and shyly handed me a box with a large bow. I quickly opened it and could not believe my eyes. There was a microscope. This was the one I needed to get into college. Unable to contain my emotions, I rushed to Leo, and he gently hugged me and goosebumps ran through my body. Leo asked anxiously why I was so sad on my birthday. I hesitated and timidly replied that it looked like the twins were spending the money my parents had left me, but Leo's face changed. And he added that the twins were his best friends. They would never do that. I was so hurt. Why don't you believe me? Then Mike and Toby appeared on the steps. They seemed to have heard everything. Just looking at them made a cold sweat break out on my forehead. I pushed Leo away and ran to my room. Guys stole from me. I had to report it to the police. I picked up the phone with trembling hands. Damn, my hands are shaking. They pounded on my door and soon there was a loud crunch. Toby broke the flimsy latch. He grabbed my phone and shouted that if I wanted to complain about something I would regret. Guests began to flock to my room. It looked like they heard something. Oh, teenage whims. Toby told them sarcastically. He left, and I was still shaking. I couldn't go outside. The twins were just playing video games in the living room. Yes. That's right, the console. The new TV had a camera. If I could record their conversation, it would serve as proof for Leo. For the next half day, I tried to get timing right when the twins wouldn't be watching TV. Then I heard them go into the kitchen to get some chips. I didn't have much time, so I immediately went down to the TV and turned on the camera with trembling hands. I think it worked. All I had to do was sneak back to my room. What are you doing here? Suddenly I heard above me. I was stunned. Twin Mike was standing very close. He continued, "We'd rather you buy us something else with your money instead of just hanging around." So he didn't understand what I was doing here. I glanced at the camera. The light was on and the recording was still going on. The guys were happy and discussed their new life at my expense. I felt elated. Soon Leo would know the truth. I knew that he would support me and protect me. Just like my dad did. Tears welled up in my eyes again. As soon as Leo returned, I immediately pulled him to the TV in anticipation. I turned on the recording. Mike was already on the screen. I froze, and suddenly, black screen. I was stunned. "Leo, it looks like the camera's turned off. I'm not lying to you." But Leo only said sadly that he was very disappointed. How could I say these lies about his best friends? Lowering his eyes, he added that he had a very different opinion of me. I had a terrible sinking feeling. The person closest to me thought I was a liar. The next morning, the twins made me wash all their shoes, and when Toby saw a spot on his sneaker, he yelled that if it wasn't for the money, they would have thrown me out for sure. Suddenly, I heard someone moving in the corridor. I was desperate. In tears, I wandered into the bathroom to wash his sneakers. Why do I need all this? Even Leo doesn't believe me. Suddenly, Leo came into the bathroom. It turned out that he had returned for the wallet and had heard everything. Leo started to apologize for not believing me right away, and then he added that now he would never let me offend, but we needed proof. Then the brothers would be deprived of their guardianship rights. "Leo, I won't let you down this time. All I wanted was to win back his trust." Surprisingly, I felt more than just gratitude for him. Leo helped set up the camera on the TV, and we waited for the brothers. As soon as they entered, I blurted out, "Why did you take custody of me if you wanted a slave?" Toby just grinned at me. I could not prove anything. "Yes, of course. Let's see." We checked. Everything was recorded this time. In the morning, Leo said that the four of us were going to the amusement park in honor of my last birthday and winked at me. The guys jumped in the back of the car, and Mike immediately started making stupid jokes about me. But Leo snapped at him to apologize immediately. The boys yelled in disgust. At that moment, we were approaching the police station. Toby's twin immediately rushed to the car door handle, but I managed to block it. The police were already approaching us, and while the surprised brothers were being handcuffed, Leo handed the sheriff a flash drive with the video. As we watched the twins go, Leo turned to me, looked me in the eye, and gave me a gentle hug. Then he added that we could finally live together. I felt my cheeks turn red. I was the happiest person on the planet that night. The twins were deprived of their rights to my custody, and they were obligated to pay the money spent. Leo and I were so happy about it. I started a new life. But alas, the joy was not long. A few days later, we got a call from custody saying that due to a legal accident, Leo could no longer be my guardian. Tomorrow I would be picked up by a new guardian from another city. This was the end. All night, I could not find a place. After all, I was losing a dear person again. Tears were choking me, but I suddenly realized that I just had to thank Leo for everything. I got up early and immediately rushed to the music store. I was supposed to meet Leo for the last time in an hour. And when I saw him, I couldn't help but cry. He seemed broken too. With trembling hands, I handed Leo the guitar he'd been craving. Leo was taken aback and tried to refuse the gift, but I tried to smile through my tears and said that he was the dearest person in my life, and I wanted him to remember me. Leo was calm and silently smiled. What? Leo, don't you care? Suddenly, someone touched me on the shoulder. I almost jumped in surprise. A young man was standing nearby. He said he was my new guardian and nodded to Leo. What does it mean? Leo gently wiped away my tears and told me I shouldn't have worried so much. It turned out that my new guardian was an acquaintance of his. Having learned that he could be deprived of guardianship, had a deal with him that no one else would take me away. It turned out that he would only be my guardian according to documents, and I would live with Leo, but not officially. I burst into tears of happiness. Leo hugged me and whispered softly that first I had to pretend that my guardian was taking me away so that the guardianship service would not suspect anything, and in the evening he would pick me up. I replied jokingly, "Alright, Daddy, goodbye, I love you." Did you like the video? Then subscribe and like it. Support the channel, thank you. In the evening, I arrived at the address the detective had given me. As soon as I went inside, I saw homeless people in dirty clothes on the floor. Was this a flop house? One of them grabbed my arm. I looked closer and recognized him. That was my husband, Jim. The fact is that a year ago, he went on a business trip and disappeared. To be honest, I wasn't even upset because we hadn't talked much lately. He was always in his laptop and I had zero attention. Jim was the genius of IT, created some program, sold it to a large corporation, and became a millionaire, but he hid all the money. And he always said that all the most valuable things should be kept in a safe. I tried to get his code, but Jim was adamant. When Jim disappeared, I honestly wasn't even upset. I decided to find someone who would appreciate me. I started going to clubs and met a nice actor named Robert. He liked to hang out, not like my hubby Jim. However, the money quickly ran out from such a life. Then Robert suggested hiring a private investigator and finding Jim. That was the only way to know the code to his safe. And today, finally, a detective found my husband Jim. Only he didn't say he was a bum now. I needed to find out the code for the safe from him. But I didn't want to do it in front of everyone, so I barely tore my husband away from the other homeless people. Took him outside and pushed him into the car. Jim protested and said something, but I didn't care. On the way, I didn't let Jim get a word in, just told him how much I suffered without him. I also added that I had spent all the money on the detective, and now we needed the code to the safe to pay for all the expenses. But Jim suddenly interrupted me and asked who I was, and what kind of safe I was talking about. I stopped the car abruptly. How is that? I'm your wife. Are you having blackouts? Jim said nothing. At home, I immediately took him to the safe. Well, what are you looking at? Dial the code, just 4 digits. Jim pressed something, but the code was wrong. I don't remember anything. Nothing at all, Jim said softly and sadly. So he really had blackouts? What a surprise. I had no money for a doctor, so I decided to try it myself. Showed him a photo of us together, which was on the table. It's me, see? I'm your wife. Come on, remember. Suddenly, he smiled enigmatically and said that he remembered the photo. Looked like we went on a catamaran that day, together. Well, we did that, and what? And then Jim looked at me carefully. I came up with a code for the safe from the numbers that mean important events in my life. And it seems that it was during the walk that I came up with the first number. Hooray! Then tomorrow morning, we'll go to the park. I will help you remember everything, dear. Just don't forget to wash up. I sent him to bed. What a klutz he was. Soon, Robert and I would take all his money, and we would be happy. In the morning, Jim was waiting for me at the car. He was clean-shaven, and stylishly dressed. It would be better, of course, to remember the code and be done with it. In the park, Jim took me around some edges and bridges. Yes, Jim, it's so beautiful, but maybe you can remember the first digit of the password. But Jim suddenly took it into his head to write the decrepit catamarans. Gritting my teeth, I climbed into this boat. It was worth to have a tough time for the money. I had to dodge the spray flying from the wheels of the catamaran. Jim noticed how annoyed I was and deliberately swam even faster. Hey, what are you doing? You ruined my hair. I shouted for Jim to turn back to the beach immediately, but he was staring at some swans. I was running out of patience, and I was about to get up to speak when the boat lurched, and I fell into the water. Help me! I can't swim! I went deeper and deeper under the water, and the last thing I heard was a dull splash. When I woke up, I saw Jim standing in front of me, looking flustered. He was all wet and said he could barely get me out of the water. I immediately pushed him away. It's all your fault. The first digit is 2. Like a swan's neck, Jim said happily. What? And the other numbers? But Jim just shrugged. Okay, at least that way, but now I needed a warm bath. At home, I locked myself in the bathroom and called Robert. I missed him so much. But he interrupted me and asked about the safe. When he heard that I hadn't got the code yet, he told me to hurry up. There was music in the background. I suddenly felt sad that he was hanging out without me, but I pushed those thoughts away, just a little more. When I came out of the bathroom, Jim noticed that I was sad and tried to hug me, but I pulled away. Better remember the code. We'll soon have something to eat. How could I help him remember the code? Got an idea. I took out our album and began to play the role of the worried wife. I showed him one picture after another. But Jim didn't react. How could he forget all this? And then he pointed to our picture from the Grand Canyon. It seemed that on this trip, he came up with a second figure. I decided not to delay and rented a Jeep and a Mexican guide. I hoped I was not wasting our last money, and he would remember the damn code. 3 hours later, we were driving through the canyon, the guide talking cheerfully and Jim gazing thoughtfully at the scenery. When we stopped at the edge of the abyss, the Mexican suggested that we go out and take a photo. Jim was happy, but I was uneasy. The guy was looking at my bag in a strange way. As soon as Jim and I got out, I felt someone pushing me toward the cliff. Give me the bag or I'll push you over. The Mexican was coming at us. I looked into the abyss. One more step and we would fall. But suddenly Jim whispered, "Don't be afraid," and abruptly knocked the guy to the ground. Jim, what are you doing? While he was trying to restrain the Mexican, I began to call for help. But when I turned around, all I saw was the guide running away. Jim ran up to me and asked if I was hurt, even though he had a split eyebrow. And then I remembered that when I married Jim, he didn't have much money yet. But I knew I was always safe with him. Jim took my hand and said, "Look at the sunset." I looked up the sky and was speechless. Because of this stupid Mexican guy, we almost missed this beauty. We sat on the edge of the cliff until the sun went down. I waited a long time, but Jim didn't remember anything. When it was almost dark, I pulled Jim's arm and told him it was time to go. Come on, Jim. The world is still full of wonders. Suddenly, Jim abruptly got up from the ground and told me that I had helped him. He always called the Grand Canyon the 8th wonder of the world. The next number was 8. I threw my arms around Jim. We would open the damn safe soon. At home, I spent the whole evening flipping through our album. I wanted to know what other places might be important to him. Flipping through the pages with the photos, I was surprised to note it seemed that sometimes I was really happy with him and it was not about the money at all. But now I had Robert. All my memories with Jim were in the past, and I lived in the here and now. In the morning, Jim took me for a walk around the neighborhood. To walk again? I was so sick of it, but he said he had an idea. We'd been wandering the streets all day, and I'd been longing to sit down somewhere. Fortunately, we came to a park with a gazebo. I rushed over and sat down on the first bench I saw. Then Jim asked me mysteriously if I remembered the place. His words gave me the creeps. This was the place where we met. On what date did we meet? Oh, I remember. April 26th. He said he was very touched that I remembered the date. And then I added the 2 and 6 were the remaining digits of the code. His heart told me so. Jim approached me. Does he want to kiss me? We were interrupted by a call from Robert. Damn, not now. hung up on him. But Jim noticed. "Who is this?" he asked. I hesitated, but quickly said that it was some kind of advertisement. We walked home in silence. I didn't understand. Why did I hung up on Robert? I wanted to be with Jim. I didn't even notice we were at the house. I immediately remembered the safe. I would get this over with soon. Suddenly, I heard a deafening noise coming from the office where the safe was. I opened the door and saw Robert with a gas burner, who was trying to open the door of the safe. When he saw me, he stopped for a second and said nervously, "You're no good. I'll do it myself." Robert turned on the burner and quickly finished what he had started. The door gave way and opened. Jim had been watching the whole thing blankly. Robert and I were stunned. We looked inside, but there was no money there. Only my wedding photo with Jim. Wait. I turned to Jim and said, "Is that what you call the most valuable thing?" He smiled. My heart ached. Disappointed, Jim said that he had always kept the money in the basement. "You can have it. It's in 2 old suitcases." And then he added quietly, "I remember everything. But it's a pity that for you, money was the most valuable thing in life." Jim left. Robert ran happily down to the basement, and I couldn't move. After a while, Robert picked up the suitcases with the money from the basement and dragged me to the taxi. "Hurry up to the airport before that jerk changes his mind and catches up with us," Robert said. In the taxi, I couldn't stop thinking. This picture and all the numbers in the code were connected to our memories. So, this was really the most valuable thing for him. Jim really cared about me. How did I not notice this for so many years? As soon as we arrived, Robert grabbed the suitcases with the money and jumped out of the taxi. "Come on, get out, we have to go," he shouted angrily. But I was thinking, and I couldn't move. It was too hard to shut out my thoughts. Then Robert calmly said that he would go alone. After all, he finally had all the money, and then it became clear to me why he was trying so hard. In an instant, I slammed the door and shouted to the taxi driver, "We're going back." I realized he really loved me all this time. No one was home. I was restless, but suddenly I remembered Jim saying goodbye to his homeless friends. Could I be there? I ran around the flop house, oblivious to the smell and the dirt. I was just about to leave when I noticed someone in the corner, and I came over quietly. It was Jim. I rushed to him and begged his forgiveness on my knees. What a fool I am, Jim. You loved me more than anything in the world. How could I not see that? I was sobbing, and Jim was holding me close and apologizing for not paying enough attention to me. When he remembered everything, Jim felt ashamed, and he decided to remind himself and me how good we were together, although we sometimes did not notice it. Without breaking our embrace, we left the flop house and went to the park, to our gazebo. And then Jim said, "If you want, we can go to the club right now." But I already had a better idea. "Let's have a hot dog, and we'll walk in the park until morning." Did you like the video? Then subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you.
That day, my friend Oliver dragged me to a restaurant to meet a rich businessman who had money to invest in our startup. The businessman agreed to give us 5 minutes of his time. We looked like rich people. Chic suits, high status watches. We ordered the most expensive dishes on the menu. But it was all fake. The watches were replicas and the suits were for rent. Oliver pawned his grandmother's ring so that we could have dinner here. They'll find us out for sure. The businessman still didn't show up, and I was about to leave when a girl came up to our table. How pretty she was. It turned out that we had been booked at the same table by mistake. Oliver immediately invited the girl to join us. She said yes. I haven't had a nice relationship with a girl in a long time, therefore, what if this was my chance? Her name was Harriet. She was supposed to have dinner with a friend, but she just canceled their meeting. We got talking, and in order to not lose my face, I said that I come to this restaurant, constantly. Like I went to a good college and that we have our own business, which brings in a lot of money. You should have seen Oliver's face. I was so used to playing a rich guy that I didn't recognize myself. By the end of the evening, I was so emboldened that I asked Harriet to meet again, and she agreed. And the rich guy didn't show up for the meeting, so it seemed like he wasn't gonna waste his time on us at all. On the way home, Oliver kept talking about the business, and that we could do it without being rich. Our project would start making money soon, but, of course, I didn't listen to him. I only thought about her. Oliver understood everything from my stupid smile, and he immediately decided to break off my whole buzz. A gorgeous girl has gorgeous requests, he confidently stated, and unfortunately, he was right, because I lied to her about everything. I have no bank account, no education, and the only thing I have is our startup. The day was set for the next day, but I wasn't going to back it up no matter what. When I got home, my mother was already asleep. I moved in with her when her health got worse. The doctors said that they needed a kidney transplant. After my dad died, I had to take care of my mother, and I wanted to make her happy. We sold almost everything, but in the end, we collected the necessary amount, and now all that was left was to wait in line for the surgery. Soon, Harriet texted me. She thanked me for dinner and said that she loved the lobsters. Man, I set the bar too high. I started searching through the cabinets for anything else that could be quickly sold to raise at least some money, and I came across a box with my mother's stash for surgery. No, stop. The idea of taking money from there was very bad. And I hope Harriet doesn't just like me because I'm allegedly a rich dude. The next day, I took Harriet to the park and gave her a bunch of daisies. She asked, "Is this a joke?" Harriet was ready to leave, and I was scared. I lied that this was a hoax, and the real date would be at my favorite restaurant. We took a taxi, and I made up an excuse to stop near my house. I said I was helping the poor, and I needed to check on one of them. Harriet said it was very nice, but she'd rather wait in the car. Phew, close call. I flew into the apartment and reached into the closet for the stash. "I'll pay you back. Honestly, I hope Mom doesn't notice anything." At the restaurant, Harriet cheered up, and I was very happy about it. And days went by, and Harriet was really happy, because I always gave her expensive gifts. A week later, she started inviting me to hang out with her richy friends. The rich world just blinded me. But I kept thinking that the money was running out. One day, Oliver called me and told me that we were finally rich. Of course, he was joking, but yeah. The startup brought in the first money, which means that I will return everything I took from my mother's stash. But my entire share of the profit had been spent on an expensive bracelet for Harriet, which she begged for the same day. She was thrilled, and at the end of the evening, she invited me to a family dinner. She said that she had serious feelings for me, which meant it was time to meet her parents. Wow, I was beginning to think that she was only with me for the money. But getting to know your parents is an important step. Such trust. X day has arrived. We went to Harriet's parents' house, but I couldn't find a place for myself. I thought they'd figured me out in a heartbeat. In the end, it turned out to be much worse than I imagined. First, her family lived in a mansion, where I felt uncomfortable. And secondly, her dad immediately flooded me with questions. Where I studied, who I work for, and what I do in life. I had to repeat the usual lie. I study at a prestigious college and work on a successful project. Harriet's mother immediately liked me, but her father looked at me suspiciously. After dinner, Harriet showed me to the house. Her father had a fancy office. We talked in the luxurious chairs, and for the first time that evening, I relaxed a little. Suddenly, Harriet got up and went to the safe. She asked me to be quiet. She was going to borrow some money from her dad. As I understand it, her father didn't spoil Harriet with money, so she stole it from his safe, a little at a time. What a familiar situation. I watched as she fearfully dialed the numbers on her father's safe. It was strange that such a large amount of money was kept under the PIN code 1111. When we said goodbye to Harriet's parents, her father took me aside and asked if I had prepared a gift for Harriet. Her birthday was coming up. I immediately lied that I had a necklace with large rubies. As luck would have it, Harriet heard this and started thanking me. What have I done? Where will I get the money from? I was as dark as a cloud when I got home, and then my mother decided to finish me off completely. She will get surgery in 2 days. The doctor called and said that there was a free place. They just needed her consent. Mother was so happy. She started to hug me, but I snapped at her. This stupid surgery was completely out of time. My mother asked what was wrong with me, but I just mumbled that everything was fine and ran into the room. I couldn't sleep at night. How could I get the money in 2 days? There was no point in asking Oliver, since he was handing over bottles to buy noodles to feed himself. The next morning, I went to several banks, but none of them wanted to give a loan to a ragamuffin with a weird startup. I was so desperate that I even considered robbing a bank. Stop. Harriet's rich dad wouldn't even notice if a few pathetic $1,000s go missing from his safe. The safe is full of money, and I remember the code. Why didn't I think of this before? I started preparing for the robbery. I made a mask out of the hat and figured out how to get around the cameras and security. That night, I went to Harriet's house. Luck was on my side. I waited until a couple of thugs had moved away from the wall and jumped over it. But there was a real giant with my club. My heart almost jumped out of my chest. As soon as he was gone, I ran to the front of the door. The office was on the second floor, where I crept on tiptoe. My hands were shaking with excitement as I typed in the code on the safe. That's it, Steve. There's no turning back. Now, you're not only a liar, but also a thief. When the safe was opened, I quickly stuffed the money into my pockets and went on the stairs. I was about to go down to the first floor, but Harriet's father was standing right next to me. Damn it! I tried to slip past him, but he heard footsteps and noticed me. The old man tried to grab hold of me and pulled off the mask. I fearfully rushed away and hit him with my shoulder, not on purpose. In the next second, he was falling head over heels. Suddenly, I heard a crunch. I wanted to see if he was all right, but there was no time. I might be caught, and I ran away. On the way home, I told myself that he had hurt himself and nothing terrible had happened to him, but I definitely got caught. He saw my face and he must have recognized me. Harriet called me the next morning. She cried for a long time and said that her father was attacked at night. My heart skipped a beat, and my hands shook with excitement. Suddenly, he had something to say. I nervously asked if the cameras caught the attacker, but I was lucky, because Harriet said you couldn't see his face, and that her father was in a coma, but the doctors didn't tell them to hope for the best. God, how lucky I am. If only she knew that her father was in a coma because of me. I was so scared that I even thought of turning myself into the police. But I knew it would only make things worse for everyone. I had to wait for Harriet's dad to wake up. Wait, what if he doesn't remember anything, and everything will just be as before? My mother's surgery went successfully, and she didn't notice the loss of money. We wanted this for so long, and I couldn't even be happy for my own mother. Oliver and I were already making good money in our business, and within a few days, I had quietly returned the stolen money to Harriet's father's safe. I was on pins and needles for a few weeks. I wanted Harriet to leave me alone, but in such a difficult situation, she needed support and gifts again. And then Harriet's father woke up. I did not want to go in to see him at all, but Harriet said he wasn't thinking straight, and he wasn't talking right now. She asked me to come, and I agreed. Her father looked bad. He could barely breathe, but he still found the strength to sit up and point a finger at me, whispering, "You." Fortunately, he didn't have time to finish. His eyes rolled back and his mouth foamed. The doctors tried to resuscitate him. As we sat in the waiting room, Harriet anxiously waited for her father to get better, and I knew I was finished. I needed a distraction, so I suggested a snack. I brought us sandwiches and instant coffee from the vending machine. Last supper on the loose. Harriet was acting up again, and haughtily said that she didn't eat gluten. Who would doubt it? Suddenly, the doctor came out of the room and mournfully looked at Harriet. They couldn't do anything. Harriet slid to the floor and sobbed. At this moment, her mother rushed into the hospital. She ran up to her daughter and began to calm her down. Two states were fighting in me. I hated myself for what I had done. Even if it was an accident, I killed a man. Although, on the other hand, it was difficult to contain my joy, because no one would know my terrible secret. I took one last look at poor Harriet and left the hospital, and that was the end. We never met again. I went too far for her.